At the very beginning, I mentioned a few things about the foundational text of Yogachara system. We have to remember this Buddhism has created a very huge, mind-boggling corpus of philosophical literature. And it was only from the later half of 19th century that the Western world, the intellectual tradition of Western world, had an access to some of these philosophical literature. But I will give just a broad picture. So we were discussing a well-known book which is called Vijñapti Matrada Siddhi, which I am going to continue discussing today again. So Vijñapti means awareness. Vijñapti Matrada means or consciousness, awareness or consciousness. Consciousness or awareness alone exists. All the objects that we are aware of have no real existence apart from our awareness of their existence. So, according to them, the awareness and an object that we are aware of, they emerge together. Sahobalambhaniyama it's called. Now, the highest goal of a Yogachara philosopher is to attain this awareness, this realization, the realization that consciousness alone exists, nothing else exists. So the textbook, the text itself is called Vijñapti Matrada Siddhi, one of the magnum opus works of Vasubandhu. He was supposed to be a younger brother. There are some traditions according to which he was the elder brother of a small group of philosophers. One is Asanga and Vasubandhu. Asanga is also an equally great philosopher, his elder brother. Yogachara Bhumi and Mahayana Sangraha. These are two important books of Asanga. And Vasubandhu's important work is Vijñapti Matrada Siddhi, and it consists of Trimshika and Vimshatika. Trimshika implies 20 verses on this philosophy of consciousness alone exists. And Vimshatika is 20 verses, Trimshatika is 30 verses. So Vimshatika is one part of the Vijñapti Matrada Siddhi, and Vasubandhu himself wrote a vritti, a commentary on Vimshatika. And then Trimshatika has got a large number of vrittis and commentaries. And this is one important group of books. The other one is Asanga's famous books, that is Yogachara Bhumi, Yogachara Bhumi Shastram, and Mahayana Sangraha. Now, what Asanga did, he made a great contribution to Buddhism, Yogachara system. He proposed this concept of Alaya Vijnana. Alaya Vijnana implies the repository of all impressions. Vijnana means dimensions of awareness. Alaya means repository. Vijnana means awareness. So all these dimensions of consciousness are accumulated in Alaya Vijnana. That is one theory. And then in addition to that, and one important book to remember is, which came later, Tathagata Garbha Sutram. Tathagata Garbha Sutram, according to some tradition, it contains the actual teachings of Lord Buddha. But one important contribution of this text is that it puts forward the idea that in every human being there is this possibility, the potency to become a Buddha. You can a Buddha Buddhahood, because Buddhahood is inherent in you. Now, this is in some ways a bit different. It's a bit different from the Yogachara system per se, mainstream Yogachara. Because Yogachara tells you that Vijnana alone exists, everything else is non-existent. But here in the Tathagata Garbha, the idea is there is Garbha means in the womb, the potency. A seed has got the potency to become a sprout and a tree. Like that, in all of us, there is this inherent potency. This, in a way, I am reminded of Swami Vivekananda's great definition of religion. This is actually a modern statement, restatement in English of the fundamental principle in Advaita Vedanta. That is, religion is the manifestation of divinity already in man, already in all of us. There is this divine that is present. That divinity can manifest when we practice Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and so on. So, this Tathagata Garbha Sutra, it tells you that there is this potency in all of you to become a Buddha. So, there is slight difference. Now, what happened was another very well-known book came into existence later, Lankavatara Sutra. Lankavatara is a later work. In Lankavatara, they say, it again claims to contain the actual teachings of Buddha, but there are multiple authors. We cannot really say, maybe there are many authors behind. Slowly it evolved in course of time. In the Lankavatara Sutra, there is an attempt to reconcile, to harmonize the concept of Ale Vijnana and the concept of Yogachara. Ale Vijnana tells you there is Buddhahood in you. Yogachara tells you that everything in this, all the objects in the world are unreal, only awareness exists. So, in the Lankavatara Sutra, there is an attempt to reconcile these apparently slightly different concepts. So, Lankavatara Sutra harmonized Tathagata Garbha from Tathagata Garbha Sutra and the mainstream Yogachara philosophy. Of course, in addition to this, we have to remember Maitreya's Madhyanta Vibhaga Shastram and Abhisamaya Alankara. That is too important for Maitreya, it's an earlier book. And then these are some of the points we have to keep in mind. Now, one important point to remember is this Yogachara, its mainstream Yogachara system, it accepts three intrinsic natures of phenomena. One is, as I mentioned earlier, Parikalpita. Parikalpita Swabhava, three Swabhava they call. Three natures. One is Parikalpita. Kalpita means unreal or imagined. That is, for example, the mistaken notion or perception of duality between subject and object. Yogachara says objects do not exist, subject or vijnana, consciousness alone exists. So, if you perceive something in the objective phenomenal world as different from your own mind, then that is Parikalpita, that is only imagination. In fact, I'm going to discuss some of the important karikas from Vimshati, Vikyamti Mantraga, Siddhita Vimshati with Vasubantu's Vritti. And then the next one is Paratantra. So Parikalpita and Paratantra. Paratantra means is the interdependent origination of empirical phenomenal world, etc. Based on cause and effects. For example, this Praditya Samutpada, everything in the phenomenal world is part of the dependent origination cycle. It is, again, it is dependent upon something or interdependent. Everything is caused by something, conditioned by something, and itself becomes a cause of something else. So, paratantra. Paratantra itself means non-independent. It's a literal meaning. The third one is parinishpanna. Parinishpanna means perfected, highly accomplished, the ultimate reality, free from all perceptual or conceptual constructions and dualistic perception, means subject-object distinctions completely gone. That is called parinishpanna nature. So there are three important natures in the phenomenal world. This is one important principle here. Now, so I already mentioned here this important contribution of Asanga Ale Vijnana and important contribution of Langavadara Sutra, which tries to explain the concept of this Tathagata Garbha in a very interesting way. For example, Ale Vijnana has got two levels. One is the pure, the other one is defiled, impure. So what is your inherent Buddhahood? Is the pure, the pure aspect. In other words, whatever dimensions of consciousness are existing in the Ale Vijnana, the pure, the perfect nature, that constitutes this potency of Tathagata Garbha. Means you can one day become a Buddha if you increase the pure awareness in yourself. In a way, there are scholars and references in some of the books which tell you that Buddha himself was slowly realizing his own Buddhahood when he meditated under the Bodhi tree. Ihasane shushyudu me sharidam tagasti mamsam cha vilayam cha yatu aprapya siddhim bahu janma durlabham naivasanat kayam adaschalishyati. My body won't move away from here till I have attained this realization, which is possible only by gradual evolution, which require a number of life cycles, bahu janma durlabham. And what happened in each of these Jataka tales, Buddha's rebirth stories, you find Buddha is ascending the steps of evolution, because slowly that parinishpanna, the pure Buddhahood, is attained, and he was born as Gautama Buddha. This is the story behind. So this Buddha, we call it something called Buddha nature. Buddha nature is obscured by defilements, mental and moral impurities, and through purification and practice, you can attain Buddhahood as Buddha himself did that. Now, this doctrine emphasizes that this inner nature is not an ego. It is rather the ultimate pure, boundless reality. It is the essence of everything. And the Tathagata Garbha sometimes described as a positive expression of, that is an important thing to equate Tathagata Garbha of Asanga's Ale Vijnana, and that along with that, along with emptiness. So the emptiness is attained when you attain the pure Buddhahood. And the Buddhahood nature is obscured by defilements, and those defilements can be purified, and then that Buddhahood self-reveals itself in course of time. So this is the idea very, very elaborately articulated in the well-known book Tathagata Garbha Sutra and related books. The idea of Buddhahood, and which I mentioned earlier. Lankavatara Sutra later reconciled, made an effective reconciliation of the concept of Buddhahood as mentioned in the Tathagarbha Sutra, with the slightly different view expressed in the mainstream Yogachara system, Vasubandhu and others. So you can find this idea is very, very famous in many of the countries, and eventually in Zen Buddhism, some of the meditative practices that evolved in course of time, they are trying to bring out, to attain, to realize this Buddhahood that is already present in all of us. So in other words, Lankavatara is a very classical work because of its reconciliation. So it is both a Yogachara cornerstone and also it's a transformative, because it is a foundational text in Yogachara system, but also it affected a reconciliation, and it also gives you scope that one day you can be a Buddha through constant practice. So this is sometimes called the Chitta Matra. It's an important teaching in Lankavatara. Chitta Matra is a very important book. It's a very complex position in Yogachara system. One of its main theme is this Chitta Matra concept, which means mind alone. Chittam means mind. So we have to remember, when we use the word Chittam or mind, is a difficult term. It is used in one sense in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. It has got a slightly different implication in yoga, Patanjali yoga system. And in Buddhism, it has got a slightly different. But the most comprehensive implication is found in Buddha system. In the Vedanta system, mind is only Sankalpa Vikalpatmika Antakarana Vritti. In other words, when we are thinking this way or that way, not in a decisive manner, but in an indecisive manner, then it is mind that is functioning. And that mind is sometimes the meaning of Chittam in some context. In some other context, that is mana. But in some other context, Chitta means the repository of memories. That is also very superficial in its implication compared to Buddhism. So according to Advaita Vedanta, Chittam is a repository, one of the four components of the mental system, not mind but mental system. Mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. Mana means sankalpa vikalpatmika antakarana. You are thinking this way or that way, not sure. Buddhi means the deciderative faculty. You have decided this is that. And ego, ahankara, means when you identify yourself as the experiencer of what you are talking about. And chitta means the repository of all memories. Anyway, according to Yogachara system, especially in Lankavatara, they gives a beautiful exposition of this Chitta Matrada, I may call it. Mind only, the experience that mind alone exists. All external objects are unreal. So it systematically teaches that all phenomena are manifestations of one Chitta Matra, means they call universal mind. So remember, in the Yogachara system, the word Chitta takes a very, very profound implication. I mean, universal mind. And the universal mind, which is perceiving everything, which is subject, which also is a repository of all pravritti vijnana, means individual awareness, individual dimensions of awareness. All exist in this Chitta Matra. So it completely rejects the reality of external objects, and this of course is very much in agreement with the mainstream teachings of Yogachara system, It tells you that consciousness or Vijnana alone exists. Again, the Lankavatara also takes up this idea of Ale Vijnana, the storehouse of all consciousness. So, the classical Yogachara means mostly the teachings of Asanga and Vasubandhu. Asanga's well-known book, Yogachara Bhumi, and Vasubandhu's Vijnapti Matrata Siddhi. So, the classical Yogachara, it focuses on Ale Vijnana as a source, storehouse or repository of karmic seeds belonging to or coming from innumerable life cycles. So, in contrast to the mainstream Yogachara system represented by Vasubandhu and Asanga, the Lankavatara takes a much more reconciliatory view. He reinterprets this as the undefiled. Means what do you mean? Ale Vijnana is undefiled mind, the Tathagata Garbha. So Ale Vijnana, according to some other sources, Ale Vijnana has got the pure alaya, repository of all pure dimensions of awareness. That is Tathagata Garbha. Then there are also defilements. For example, you find in Buddhas, frequently this can be understood in the light of the rebirth stories of Buddha. You can find in Buddha's Jataka tales, rebirth stories, this is a gradual ascent. Buddha goes on evolving to higher and higher levels. So all these defilements, all impure components or elements of awareness are transcended. In mindfulness also, this is what we are doing. In mindfulness, when we meditate, these different defilements, different impure thoughts and ideas will emerge in the mental system. We are aware of this because awareness is there, but we detach from it. When you detach from it, you transcend it. This is a very important point. So when you are a witness, it means you are aware of the problem, but you are not affected by the problem. In a court of law, you are called a witness. When there is awareness, because that's why you are called into witness, to be a witness. At the same time, you are not involved in the action that you are aware of, that you are witnessing, that you are a witness of. So like that, when we become established in the empirical, momentary nature of all phenomenal experiences, all the defilements are removed and this awareness alone is realized. So, Lankavatara reconciled these two. So, this is a very, very important point, remember. The sutra asserts the ultimate reality, dharmada is beyond all conceptualization. This idea is also there. The ultimate experience in Buddhism, it transcends, it goes beyond all verbalizations, all descriptions. Essentially, it's a matter of inner experience. So today, after this, I want to take up some important verses from, mostly from the Vijnapti Matrata Siddhi, the Vimshati. Vimshati means 20 verses, but it's very important because Vasubandhu, the author himself, he wrote a vritti. Vritti means a short commentary. So that's why it is important. And then again, this Lankavatara Sutra, its contribution is a meditative practice. Yogachara's detailed description of meditative disciplines mentioned in the Yogachara Bhumi Shastra by Asanga. All these are reconciled by this great work of Lankavatara. Now, of course, there is a connection between mainstream Yogachara and mindfulness. This is what I was trying to explain. Mindfulness was essentially based on one of Buddha's well-known discourses, Satyupattana Sutta, that was when he was addressing monks, shorter version, and Mahasatyupattana Sutta when he was addressing the laity, I mean monks and also non-monastic community. So the connection between Yogachara system and later developments like Zen system, mindfulness, so very interesting to remember. In Yogachara, mindfulness and Zen, because one important aspect of Buddhism is many of the meditative practices are still continuing in different parts of the world, especially Southeast, in the Southeast Asia, means especially in Cambodia, Laos and other places, and also in the Far East, in China, Japan, all these countries. And you have to remember before that, there are two main streams. One is the Theravada, meditative practices, mostly actively followed by the great Buddhist monks in Sri Lanka, Burma, Cambodia and other places. Theravada itself means Sthaviravada. Sthavira means the elders. There was a schism. This is not within our scope today, but it's better to remember. There was a schism in the second Buddhist council, which must have taken place around 100 years after Buddha's passing away. And in this Buddhist council, one group was supposed to be more orthodox and more rigid in the interpretation of the Vinaya, the disciplines. Vinaya, one of the Vinaya Pitaka, one of the three baskets, Pali canonical tradition. So they used to be called as Sthaviravadins, or which later Sthavira means the elder. That is in Sanskrit called as Sthavira. In Pali become Thera. So Theravada is nothing but Sthaviravada. I mean, they represent a tradition that is closer to Buddha, historically speaking. So there is a big schism in Buddhist community. Around maybe it must have happened around 110 year BC in the second Buddhist council, in which another group, Mahasankhikas, who are the forerunners of today's Mahayana system, they were more broad-minded. And they, as I mentioned earlier, as we discussed earlier, they believed in Bodhisattva, the perfected souls, Bodhisattva, the attained Buddhas, who are very compassionate and who want to help other spiritual seekers to slowly evolve and realize the Buddhahood, the Mahasankhikas. And they try to interpret the Vinaya, the Buddhist disciplines, meditative practices, in a broader way. They believed in compassion. They also believed that we should do something for others to evolve in the spiritual life. In contrast to this, the elders called Sthaviravadinaha, in Sanskrit called Sthaviravadinaha, Theravada. They were more literary in their interpretation of the Vinaya, Buddha's teachings. So technically we can say today's Mahayana system is somewhat, it is at least they claim to descend from the lineage of Mahasankhikas. And today's Theravada system, they claim to belong to the elders, the Sthaviravada. I mean, Sthaviravadinaha is used, who are more orthodox in the interpretation of the Pali canon. So that should be kept in mind. So in the Theravada system, they want to focus on individual spiritual growth. So you should try to become an arhat, an enlightened person, without bothering much about what happens to others. So if you yourself become Buddha, attain nirvana, become an arhat, an enlightened person, that should be the ultimate and the only goal in your life. In contrast to this, the Mahayana Buddhists and their forerunners, after the schism in the second Buddhist council called Mahasankhikas, they wanted to expand and broaden their outlook, and they wanted to emphasize that there are bodhisattvas who are eager to help other spiritual seekers indirectly. So the different story. So in the interpretation, the popular interpretation of the rebirth stories, you can find in each of these life cycles, Buddha was a bodhisattva. He was trying to help others to become enlightened. So the core idea of this Vijñapti Matra Siddhi is, one is Vijñapti, consciousness alone exists. Whatever else or reality of external objects, phenomenal world, is nothing but a projection of the mind. When we take up the original Karikas of Vasubandhu, we can find this. The beginning itself, Purva Paksha, an objection is raised against this view, and then Vasubandhu refutes that and puts forward his own view. And the goal of these spiritual disciplines, whether Zen Buddhism or mindfulness, is the purification of consciousness, especially through transformation of the Ale Vijnana. So when you practice this meditation or mindfulness, when you practice detachment, your mind gets pure. I can give one example, even from a very common sense illustration from a psychological point of view. Suppose you never know what it is to do something wrong. You never know anything about the evil. You don't know there is such a thing as theft in the world, greed in the world, competition in the world, jealousy in the world. You never knew this. Suppose you come across people who are greedy, jealous, violent, and you have seen them, and then you realize, I should not be like this. This is wrong. So you are aware of the problem, but you prevent it from entering your mind. Now, then you will be immune to those negative influences. But suppose a person who is totally unaware of wrong things in this world, he may fall a victim. He may be trapped by wrong things because he never knew that there is such a thing as greed or competition or evil in this world. So when we remove defilements in our own consciousness by becoming aware of it, at the same time transcending it, then it's like a vaccination. It's like a vaccination. You know, COVID vaccine, you are given a little bit of COVID virus, and it gives you the power to fight it. So next time when you are in the company of people who are sick, you are immune. So you develop a kind of immunity by this mindfulness. You can find, slowly this becomes clear. So that's why in the well-known book Yogachara Bhumi, Asanga makes a very important statement. Smrti upasthanam yada bhavati tada vijnanasya utpada veya dharmata pratyavekshate. Means smrti upasthanam yada bhavati. So when smrti upasthanam means when mindfulness is established, yada smrti upasthanam bhavati, when mindfulness is settled or established, when we get established in mindfulness, what happens is, tada, then vijnanasya utpada vedharmada pratyavekshati. What happens is, this arising and the rise and fall nature of the consciousness observed. You are aware of, you observe, pratyavekshati, the arising and cessation, utpada veya, the rise and fall, arising and cessation of all these empirical phenomena, that is dharmata means nature. The utpada vyaya dharmata, that means you pratyavekshati, you clearly observe, you or they are being observed by you. So the rise and fall of all the experiences are being observed by you when yada smrtibasthanam bhavati, when you get established in mindfulness. Pure psychology. From everyday life we can easily find out. Well, you tell, suppose you tell your children, no, smoking is bad. Well, he can write a book to argue with you that smoke is not bad. Suppose he himself happens to, all right, you smoke, fine, let's see. And within a few days he starts coughing, asthma. And then he come and tell you, you're right. I understand smoking is not good. So he develops the immunity, like a vaccination. You develop immunity to the problem of smoking. I mean, I cannot give more worldly examples. This is what I can give. Or drinking is bad, but when somebody experiences the problem in actual life, shortly, if he can come out of it, he develops immunity. So through mindfulness what happens is, smrtipasthanam, that is Satyupattana Sutta, Satyupattana Sutta. Sati means smriti in Sanskrit, Upattana means upasthana. Of course, this Yogachara Bhumi is a great work by Asangas. You remember, these are all Sanskrit classics. It's a very important thing. These are all the grandeur and the beauty and the charm of Sanskrit. Next to Shankaracharya, some of these great books are as good as the best. Of course, by universal agreement, Shankaracharya's Sanskrit is, according to Prasanna Gambhira, it is so grand, like Mount Everest, and it flows like a beautiful river. The continuity, the fluidity, it makes you happy. It's so charming. Prasanna means something that makes you happy. The beauty, the poetry, the charm, like the flow of the gradual slow movement of of a river, water in river. You combine that with the grandeur of Mount Everest, Gambhira, that's the language of Shankaracharya's Sanskrit. But that's in 8th century. But the language of these great Buddhist philosophers was also equally great. That's why Smrti Upasthanam yada bhavati tada vijnanasya utpada vedharmada pratyavekshati. Now, again, there are of course, there's another very important book. It is called Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutram. We do not know who is the author. Maybe this particular text may not have had a single author, but it is presented as an instruction, as words of Buddha. It's a very, that is Smriti Prajna Paramitayaha Matrika. Smriti, mindfulness. So Smriti is not memory here. When you look at the dictionary, the meaning of smriti, or even in the yoga system, smriti is one of the vikalpas, but there is only memory. But here smriti has got a very philosophical, psychologically very profound and spiritual implication. Smriti here means mindfulness. Awareness plus the ability to detach yourself from the object that you are aware of, because you realize the object doesn't really exist, except depending upon the awareness. That's the experience. So that's why mindfulness is the mother of higher wisdom, transcendental wisdom. That is Smriti Prajna Paramitayaha Matragami, mother. So this awareness of mindfulness is the source of spiritual wisdom, transcendental wisdom. Now, at the beginning of this Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi, I'm going to discuss a few important things. One is there is the sutra, the first mantra is this: Vijñapti matram eva edat asat arthavabhasanat yada taimirigasya asat kesha chandradi darshanat. So this is an important point, remember. If we explain this, then we can go to the first verse. This is the second verse actually. The first verse is actually the beginning of an objection from a school of realists. It could be the realist may be Vaisheshika, that is atomism, Sautrantika, one of the realist schools of belonging to the lineage of Theravada. So if you are looking for the first verse, it says, Vijñapti matram eva edat asat arthavabhasanat yada taimirigasya asat kesha chandradi darshanat. So this world is only cognition, because whatever appears apart and different from the subject, vijnana, is like a dream. So in a dream, you may find yourself walking, but those things do not really exist. To understand this, we can just take up a Purvapaksha. Purvapaksha means an objection to the philosophy of Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi of Yogachara system. The objection, the opposite view, and its meaning, if you keep in mind, and also then we understand how Vasubandhu addresses this objection, how he refutes this objection. Then we get a very clear picture of the core of Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi. So the Purvapaksha means the objections view, opposite view. The opposite view coming from a school of realists. It could be either Sautrantikas or it could be Vaisheshikas. Vaisheshika is one of the schools of Shaddarsana, very Astika Darsana. We already described it earlier beginning. When we began this session, we referred to 12 schools of Indian philosophy, 6 schools that accept Vedas as an important, fundamental verbal testimony, pramana. 6 schools. That is Sankhya Yoga, Nyaya Vaisheshika, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa. These are 6 schools. That among them, Vaisheshika system is called Indian atomism, because they believed that different atoms come together and they form all the empirical phenomena. That's what they believed. and his exponent was Kanada. He was a great saint. Nyaya was the school of Indian logic, Gautama. Then Sankhya of Kapila and Yoga of Patanjali. Purvamimamsa, school of Vedic ritualism. Jaimini was the author, and Vedanta. Badarayana Vyasa was the correspondent, Vedanta Sutras, Brahma Sutras. So these are called 6 orthodox systems of Indian philosophy. Astika Darsanas. Among them, Vaisheshikas were very fanatical realists. So during the time of Vasubandhu, they were also very prominent in India. So Vasubandhu, you have to remember, around 3rd century AD. So Vasubandhu, in his Vritti, in Vijñapti Matra Siddhi, in the Vimshatika, he refutes the realism of Vaisheshikas, the views of Kanada, and also the views of Sautrantikas and other schools of realism belonging to Buddhism itself. So here is one objection coming from a non-Buddhist philosopher, or it could also be raised by a Buddhist philosopher belonging to Sautrantika tradition, Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas, 2 schools which are, well, traditionally you can say they are aligned to Theravada. And remember, you have to remember, till about a few decades ago, 30, 40 years ago, people used to use the word Hinayana in some of the books. But Hinayana is not a term that is very much appreciated because it has got a negative or unfortunate connotation. Hinayana means lower vehicle. So it's much more respectable term is Theravada. So Theravada means Thaviravada, elders. So the Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas are related to Theravada tradition. Like Shunyavada and Vijnanavada related to Mahayana system. So here is an objection. Yadi Vijñaptihi anartha niyamo deshakalayoho sandhanasya aniyamascha yukta krityakriya nacha. This is actually is coming from Sautrantikas, a realistic schools or a school of realism in Buddhism. Yadi Vijñaptihi anartha niyamaha deshakalayoho. If Vijñapti or consciousness is without objects, means without any extra mental objects. Yadi Vijñaptihi anartha. So Vijñapti doesn't accept. If Vijñapti is devoid of, is without any external objects, then niyamo deshakalayoho. Then what happens is, then sandhanasya aniyamascha. Niyama, aniyama. Niyama means regulation, rules, a sequence. Aniyama means the opposite, means absence of regulation. So if vijnana or awareness is without any external objects, then there will be no rule, no sequence, no regulation with regard to space and time. That is, deshakalayoho niyamaha na bhavishyati. If you say that a consciousness, Vijñapti, is without any external objects, that means if your view that awareness alone exists, Vijñapti alone exists, then there is one problem. There will be no regulation with regard to space and time. After all, you find in our empirical experience, you find there is some kind of a sequence, interrelatedness between space that is placed and time. And not only that, yuktya kritya kriya nacha. There will be no observation of regulation of the moment series. For example, yuktya kritya kriya. See, suppose you do something, there will be absolutely no sequence, no logical explanation of the moment series. and there will be no determination of actions prompted by a particular experience. So you can, in our life, you can find certain things happen. When we do certain things, it produces certain results. And then, so this would be impossible if you go by this view that awareness alone exists. Objects are totally non-existent. So this is an objection raised by Sautrantikas against Vasubandhu's Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi view. Now Vasubandhu, he gives a reply. When you read this reply, you understand a better picture of what Yogachara system is all about. I mean, this Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi view means consciousness alone exists. That doctrine, you get a clear picture when you listen to the way Vasubandhu refutes this objection and establishes his own view. So he says, Yatha timiradrishteshu keshonduadigam brahmad tatha hedu vivaryasad vijnanam viparivartade. So suppose you have got cataract or any problem with your eyes, what happens? Then what happens? You may see things differently, but things that you see which are obviously unreal do not really exist, because you have a problem with your eyes. If jaundice, all this can create problems. That is timira drishteshu. So what happens? Just hair, flies, etc. appear to exist to those who are blurred, who have blurred vision. They have, because their eyes are sick. The eyes are facing some problem. They have a problem in their eyes, maybe cataract or maybe jaundice. So they may see hair, flies, insects, all these things. But those things don't exist. Because, so this again, the Artha Kriya again will come actually in some of the later Vasubandhu addresses this problem. Certain things we experience in this world, it's Artha Kriya, and we think they really do have an existence. And so we believe they are really real. But because certain things appear to exist and there is a logical, conventional meaning, we call efficacy, functional efficacy, may call Artha Kriya. That doesn't mean those things do have an existence. So he says, Yatha timiradrishteshu keshondrigadigam brahmad tatha hedu viparyasad vijnanam viparivartade. So he says, so what happens? Vijnanam viparivartade. Consciousness or cognition transforms into erroneous causes. So what happens when we are not able to see things properly? What happens is our lack of awareness creates the impression, the illusion that certain things do exist. Vijñapti matram eva edat asad arthavabhasanad yatha taimirigasya asad kesha chandradi darshanad. This again comes there, same idea. That's the first verse actually. So this world is only cognition. External objects are unreal because its appearance arises without external objects, as in dreams. So in dreams also. So in dreams also there are many things, but they don't really exist. So on account of the appearances of non-external objects, mere consciousness alone exists. So we may see different things which appear to exist in dream or due to illness in the eyes, but those things do not really exist. So there is this argument between Sautrantikas, school of realism in Buddhism, and Vasubandhu, who is a Yogachara philosopher. And also there are arguments between Vaiseshikas, especially when Vasubandhu refutes the Indian school of atomism of the Kannada school, Vaisheshikas, who believe that everything in this world is constituted by atoms. So anyway, we will continue this discussion at a later point.
I understand. So my question is, you were saying that the Theravada school is more closely aligned with Buddha's original teachings than Mahayana. Do the Mahayana Buddhists accept that perspective, or do the Mahayana Buddhists think, no, we are the ones who are more closely aligned?
That's true. So, during the second Buddhist council, this schism took place between two groups of Buddhist monks. In those days, in the Buddhist council, most of those who attended were Buddhist monks, So, the one group who only accepted Pali canonical tradition, they are called Sthaviravadi, they were called elders. So, today you call Theravada. Theravada is a popular, respectable term, and nowadays some of them don't like to be called Hinayana. But Hina in Sanskrit means below or low or things like that, which is not a very complimentary term. So they want to be called Theravada because Thera is the Pali equivalent of Sthavira. Sthavira means the elder, the senior. So according to some scholars, some of the elderly monks, maybe nuns also, they were more rigid in their adherence to the original teachings of Buddha in the Vinaya. And so Buddha spoke only in Prakrit, and it was written down in Pali in the first Buddhist council. So it's about 483, 3 years after Buddha's passing away. There are different schools of historians in this regard. So there were those who gave a broader interpretation to Buddha's teachings and disciplines and spiritual practices. They came to call Mahasankhikas, the bigger group. Mahasankhikas later they were the foreigners of Mahayana. They believed in bodhisattvas. They also they emphasized compassion, and they believed in the great bodhisattvas, highly evolved, great spiritual teachers who will be helping you in your spiritual evolution. They believe like that, That's, Avalokiteshvara and many others are interesting. Yeah, we discussed sometime earlier.
Do they accept? Do the Mahayana Buddhists, do they accept that they've deviated from the path of Buddha, or do they think no, we the Mahayanas are closely following
I think Mahayanas believe that these Sthaviravadin, they were more rigid in the interpretation, too rigid in the interpretation. They don't say that they are wrong, but they are too rigid in the interpretation. To that extent, they were less authentic, because Buddha was very broad-minded, very flexible. It is true that Buddha was a very compassionate, flexible person, not a rigid taskmaster in that respect. So maybe there is a lot of truth in what Mahasankhikas believed in.
Namaskar.
Namaste.
My question is about this concept, chittamatra.
Yeah.
Mind only, chittamatra.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of the Yoga Sutra.
Yeah.
And in the Kaivalya Pada, there is this statement. It's natat sva pasam drishyatvat. It's like the meaning is, what I see, the meaning is, the mind is not self-illuminating, being an object. It's a knowable. Okay? You know this verse? It basically says, it can't be mind only. There has to be something behind the mind, because the mind is an object, right?
Yeah.
You can you can see the mind, you can perceive the mind.
Yeah.
So therefore, there must be the Purusha behind the mind. So these statements in Yoga Sutra, are they trying to distinguish from Buddhism? Like, are they, what is the context of these verses that seem very pointed against Vijnanavada?
Yeah, so, okay, now the word chitta in Patanjali Yoga system has got a limited meaning compared to the word chitta, used as chitta matrata, universal mind. That's the real meaning of chitta in chitta matrata concept. So, universal awareness. The universal awareness alone exists. So, but in yoga system, chitta is its meaning is not very different from what it implies in Vedanta. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So, chitta vritti means a residual effect of all your experiences. That is accumulated in the mental world. It's a repository of memories and samskaras. In Vedanta, chitta is a repository of memories only, but in yoga, it is also a repository of memories and vrittis, vasanas, samskaras, and so on. But in Yogachara, chitta means universal mind. Just got a very grand implication. So very often when we compare these, we should be able to keep in mind what particular term implies in that particular system of philosophy. And there were gap of distance of centuries between the evolution of these concepts, So you have to transcend chitta in yoga. Vrittis are there. So when you identify yourself with that vrittis, you see different things in this world. You have to go beyond it. You have to transcend these vrittis. When you transcend the vrittis, you transcend chittam. Chittam is something to be transcended in yoga. Chitta is something that is the ultimate reality in Yogachara. So the chitta matrada, that concept, it is vijnana itself, consciousness itself. So the same word has got different meaning in different systems of philosophy.
Would, like in Vedanta, we believe, or my understanding is that we believe Atman it's not conscious and it's not unconscious. It's beyond all words and descriptions.
Yeah.
Would Vijnanavadas say the same about the universal chitta? That it's beyond all verbal descriptions, it's not conscious or unconscious?
That's true. Here you find when you reach this chitta matrada, vijnapti matrada, when you reach that state, and then that state is beyond all descriptions, beyond all explanations. This is a transcendental experience. That point is well accepted in Vijnanavada. So in these systems of philosophy, when you read Yogachara Bhumi of Asanga, there is this idea of Ale Vijnana. And then when we read this Tathagata Sutra, there is this idea that within all of us there is a Buddha potentially able to manifest if you do Ashtanga Yoga, eightfold disciplines, and even Nirvana at that time. And that experience can be called Shunyada, experience of Shunyada according to Nagarjuna, Chittamatrata according to Yogachara system, Vijnapti Matrata according to Vasubandhu, and Chitta Vritti Nirodha in yoga. So there is a transcending Chitta Vrittis. But Chitta in yoga is not an all-knowing all-aware reality. It is only a repository of samskaras, vasanas. Yogachara system it is. You may call it the absolute reality. In Yogachara system is the chitta matrata or vijnapti matrata, you may call it. That's true. The absolute experience in Shunyavada is the realization of Shunyata. Everything is Shunya. Everything is devoid of any intrinsic entity, existence. That is Shunya. So when you travel not from book to book, from concept to concept, from idea to idea, when you try to think of traveling spiritual experience to spiritual experience, you can see all converging at one point. That's the point. That's why, to give an example, very simple example. Suppose you think of a great Hindu sage, or think of a man like Buddha, or think of a great Christian saint. I am talking about who had a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation. I often, whenever that thought comes to me, what I am reminded of is Father Zosima in Fyodor Dostoevsky's Brothers of Karamazov. It's a fiction picture. A great saint like Vasishtha of Indian Vedic literature. Compassion, wisdom, understanding, willing to help, and all that you find. Or Christ himself. Think of Christ himself. So all these great men, when you think of them, you find surprisingly, you find in all of them, you find certain common qualities. Kindness, wisdom, compassion, non-violence, and broad-mindedness. What you call in modern American English a good guy, you can call it. I cannot put in a better language, because if you are talking to a good person, if somebody like Christ or Buddha decides to come and take an apartment in your own building and you become your next door neighbor, you'll be happy. You won't worry too much about it. Somebody like Christ or Buddha comes or somebody who believes in these great spiritual teachers. Because they will have all these Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, Tirisha, Siddha, Samadhanam, all the qualities mentioned in Sadhana Sustaya of Hindus. Compassionate, self-restraint, willingness to forgive, forbearance, concentration, sattvic qualities. That's what comes to your mind. So where do you find a difference? You find a difference only when you look at them as concepts, as ideas, as doctrines and dogmas. Then there will be, of course, a lot of contradictions. That's why frequently when I see in India, when we travel, sometimes we find I have to encounter in cities somebody standing in the corner of a street, in a temple. They're telling people, oh, your God is not a real God. Come and be a Christian. I often wonder, would Christ have appreciated this man's way of teaching or spreading Christianity? Christ would not have used any of the language they are using. So because in our mind when we read the Bible, we have an idea. Christ like a sage, Indian sage of Vedic times. Or Buddha. Or any of the great, some of the great mystics of medieval times are examples. Anywhere, in any tradition. So what I mean to say, when you think of the spiritual experience, the spiritual nature of the person, all look alike, surprisingly alike, almost identical. So when you remember, so when you compare Chittam of Vedanta with Chittam of Yoga, Chittam of Vijnapti Matrala Siddhi Yogachara, there will be differences. But from a spiritual perspective, there will be no difference. Okay, thank you for the question. Very important and very relevant question, Okay, thank you.
On the one hand, we say in Vedanta that whatever you do, unless you do Atma-vichara, totally it's Chitta Shuddhi.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you said that the experience that you get from Buddhism is the same.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile these two viewpoints?
Yeah, Chitta Shuddhi there, again, that chitta is a repository of all vasanas, vritti, samskaras, impressions. And that can be purified. That purification will give you spiritual fitness for higher Vedanta. Now, the goal of the ultimate destination of such a spiritual seeker is chittamatrata. So you can see the difference between chittamatrata and chitta suddhi. In the Vedantic terminology, the word chitta suddhi means purity of mind, purity of the mental world, of emotions, feelings, samskaras, impressions, and so on. That is chitta suddhi. That chitta is totally different from the word chitta used in chitta matrata. Totally different, I mentioned to you. Okay? In Buddhism, Yogachara system, chitta as the universal mind as a chitta matrata has got a very profound implication. Bring down the speed.
Any practices lead to chitta shuddhi. You need to do Atma Vichara under the guidance of Guru to attain Atma Vidya.
Yeah. No,
on the other hand, now you say that Buddhism, everything gets you to the same place.
Yeah, actually, in Buddhism also, mindfulness is a way to attain chitta shuddhi. When you were aware of certain things, but you are able to remain non-attached because you understand whatever is affecting your mind is impermanent. It is unreal. It is non-existent. Then your mind is able to detach itself from all those objective things. So these objective world, objective experiences do not pollute your mind. Your mind remains unpolluted, pure, undefiled. That's why Ale Vijnana doctrine, Lingavatara, that pure Ale Vijnana is essentially Tathagata Garbha. Pure Ale Vijnana. Actually, in Vedanta also, surprisingly, when you think of Jivan Mukta, when you become totally free, pure, you become one with Atman. Jivan Mukta means Jivan Api Mukta. You are living, still you are liberated. Who is a Jivan? Jivan Mukti Viveka, well-known book is there by Vidyaranya. You can read that. English translation may be available. So when you are able to remember of your own true nature, your Swarupa as we call it in English, then you are liberated. That when you are living in this world, you can be liberated. That's what a Buddhist saint will feel. And remember, at the experience level, not at the level of terminology or vocabulary or language or words. You have to remember, this is an important point. In Sanskrit, the problem is, Sanskrit is a highly developed language, but Indian philosophy was so advanced that even Sanskrit could not find words enough to express different ideas in different systems of philosophy. So that's why according to the pre-Paninian Vedic schools of grammar, Sarvesham Shabdanam Dhatu Jattum Dhatunam Anegarthatvam Cha. It's a commentary, Durgacharya's commentary on Niruktam. Niruktam is a Yaska's great book on Indian. It's the first recorded attempt to write a dictionary or thesaurus, going back to 6th century BC, maybe a slightly elder contemporary of Buddha, Yaska. So Durgacharya was a commentator. He says, every word comes from a root. A root can have any number of meanings. Sarvesham Shabdanam Dhatu Jatum Dhatunam Anegarthatvam Cha. This is not according to modern grammar, Panini, but pre-Paninian school of grammar. And then he says, every word is coming from a root, and root can have any number of meaning, anekarthatum. Then he says, pravaktuhu prakarana vaividyat anekarthatum, means depending upon the person who uses it, and also the context in which a word is used, a word can have any number of implications and meanings. So remember, when you use the word chitta, the same word is used in Buddhism, the same word is used in yoga system, and the same word is used in Vedanta and elsewhere. It can have any number of meanings. Okay? So thank you. We had a very wonderful interaction. Please, please.
Maharaj Pranam,
Namaste,
I have a small question.
Yeah.
In the spiritual journey, we have seen the concept of instant enlightenment and gradual enlightenment. So does this happen to specific people, or the quality of sadhana? How is it different?
Yeah. Then Vedanta and Hinduism, but Sadhya Mukti, Krama Mukti, Jivan Mukti, Videha Mukti, different concepts of moksha is there. So instant illumination, really it appears to be instant because we don't know that person's previous life or previous life cycles and experiences. When you see an iceberg which is actually 100 feet and you can see just 10 feet above the sea level, we may imagine it is only 10 feet, but 90 feet may be below the sea level, water level. So like that, this sudden mukti can come, but very often, not very often, all the time, is because that person must have done a lot of spiritual sadhanas in his previous life, had gone through a lot of the spiritual experiences, then something was left out, and he was born again in a place. We had to go through some experiences, not necessarily spiritual, which will, which he had to work out some remaining karmic blocks, karmic seeds, according to the Tadhadagarbha karmic seeds. And once that is worked out, it manifests. Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel says, in one place you go on digging for a well and you dig 100 feet, 200 feet, you don't get anything. Then in another place, you may not dig that deep, but you just hit a rock. Suddenly a huge reservoir comes out. You can find. So it was there, water was there, we didn't see that, we saw only the rock, but there was below there was water. So there is no such thing as an accident in Vedanta, in spiritual life. What we call accident is something that we cannot see the full picture of. When we see the full picture, then we understand there is a background behind it. Thank you.